you have a question, pop it into the comment box and Sherry will stop me and let me know that there's a question. You can type your question in if you like, or just say that you have a question and then you can unmute yourself and ask away. It's so much better when we're interactive, so please ask questions, make comments. All right, let's get started. So let's start with some definitions. My computer is acting so weird today, so I apologize if it's fluttering or acting wonky. So let's start with some definitions. We know that we have ocular and neurological visual impairments and deaf blindness. And so for low vision, our definition is going to be a severe reduction in vision that cannot be corrected with standard glasses or contact lenses and impedes your child's ability to complete tasks in the same way that their peers with typical vision do. When we think about blindness,
oh my goodness,
we are going to use a legal definition, which is a child's best corrected central acuity of 2200 or worse in their best eye, or a visual field reduction, a visual field of no greater than 20 degrees. When we talk about CVI, we're thinking about visual impairment due to neurological trauma or conditions that affect the parts of the brain that interpret visual information. And then deaf blindness, we're going to consider students who have both an auditory and visual impairment, the condition of which impedes communication and learning needs in ways that require special education and related services beyond that of students with just vision or just hearing loss. And then when we think about these activities that we're going to have today, remember that they're kind of a general outline. And so when you do these with your child or with your student, remember that you'll need to make the adaptations according to their specific score on the CVI range, their acuity, and to their specific form of communication. All right, so orientation. Orientation, when we think about orientation, we're referring to a child's ability to use their senses to know where they are in space. So say I'm in the kitchen and I want to go to the living room. How do I get there? The act of knowing how to get there is orientation. Orientation integrates perceptual and cognitive learning. And additionally, it integrates the sensory information needed for Let me try that one again. Integrating the sensory information needed for orientation requires conceptual development that includes, among other things, body schema, body-to-body relationships, body-to-object relationships, and object-to-object relationships. And those are hierarchy. First, we work on our own body, body-to-body, my hand on my head, my hand on my knee, my foot on my leg. And then we move to the next part of the hierarchy, which is body-to-object, my back on the wall, and then object-to-object relationships, which would be the book on the table. And when we're maintaining our orientation, we need to be able to integrate spatial updating. We need to have an appropriate environment. We need to have sufficient time to complete routes and maintain our orientation in that environment along that route, as well as we have to have a conceptual understanding of objects and how they relate to space. When we think about mobility, we're thinking about the physical movement of our bodies. And we want our children, we want our students to move safely and efficiently through space. And mobility doesn't have to necessarily be walking. It can include walking, it can include crawling and running and rolling, all of those things are kind of for mobility. O&M is important, right? We all know that, or we wouldn't be here. And it provides our children with the skills needed to explore and interact in their home, in their school, and in their community environments. Research shows that when our children with visual impairment increase their feelings of safety, they increase their feelings of safety when they develop a greater understanding of their environment. And of course, the importance of family. So opera singer Andrea Bocelli, he was asked, why are you the person you are today? And his response was, I had an extremely dedicated family. I had resources early on. I never grew up thinking that I couldn't do the things that I wanted to do. And that is a testament to our families who are so invested in their children, and the same for professionals. But Joe Cutter from National Federation of the Blind, he says that parents and caregivers are the ones who set the stage for play of movement. Because in the beginning, our play is centered around movement. And Joe says in the early years, parents engage in a variety of play activities with their children. The importance of play cannot be overemphasized. Play is fundamental to being human. Fun is play. Fun and play is a child's form of work and getting the job done, of acting on the world and reaping the rewards from it. I'm going to show you this little video, hopefully, fingers crossed that it works, about what children who have disabilities say about their parents and the importance of their parents.
Becky, we're not getting the audio.
Yeah. We can't hear the video.
Huh. Well, I don't know how to fix that. So I don't know how to fix that. So I'll give you just a perception. I'll give you the outline of that. The participants are saying their parents always believed in them and always pushed them and always told them that they could do the things that they wanted to do. And what the children want their parents to know is that it's okay to take a day off. It's okay to rest. It's okay if every goal isn't met. And mostly the children want to know that they acknowledge how hard their parents have worked to get them where they are today, and that they appreciate everything that they've done for them. That's the importance of family. And if you want to really look at that video, it's an awesome video. Maybe Sherry can pop that that address into the chat box for you to look at later. Let's jump into the sequence of skills for mobility. We start with reflexes. We start with reflexes, which are involuntary movements or actions that are essential for survival. And they can include sucking or blinking. They can include hiccuping. And these reflexes are innate, and then they're shaped into more physical actions. And then we go on to motor development, which is head control and rolling and sitting and standing. It's cruising and walking and running. And we continue to shape and refine the motor skills through repetition and intentionality. After our kids are up and moving, then as needed, they might need a mobility device or a mobility tool. And these can be wheelchairs or walkers. They can be ride-on toys or push toys like those lawnmowers or those shopping carts. It could be a white cane. It could be an adaptive mobility device, or it could be a really cool belted toddle cane. And then we're going to move on to routes. After we're walking and we're using the tools needed, we're going to think about routes, getting from not necessarily the thinking about, but the actual physical movement of moving from one place to another, moving with purpose and moving with intentionality. And all of this leads our children into greater confidence. Independent mobility helps children create a positive self-image. They're like, yes, I can do this. Independent mobility helps our children build autonomy. And they think, yes, not only can I do this, but I can do this by myself. Independent mobility fosters curiosity and resilience, and independent mobility supports a child's ability for social interaction and social activities. And of course, we know that there are children and adults who need physical assistance moving from one space to the next. However, that doesn't mean that they wouldn't benefit from participating in O&M and O&M activities. Let's think about the sequence of skills for orientation. And we talked about this slightly before about how orientation is a hierarchy where we start with our own body, understanding our own body. Then we need to understand the space that's outside of our own bodies and our own immediate space, which might be their own bedroom or their kitchen or their house or their grandparents' house, familiar spaces. And then we move on to spatial understanding of the larger environments, which might be stores or places of worship. It might be small businesses and large business districts. It might be residential areas or farms or schools and zoos and parks, all of those spaces that are beyond our familiar immediate space. And not only for the larger environments do we need to understand the environment, we need to understand the context of each setting. So what would I do in a place of worship, or what would I do on a farm or in a park or in a school? What is the context of those settings? And we need to understand the contents of each of those settings. And that is from Tana Anthony, and she is from the Texas School for the Blind and Visually Impaired. Let's for a second talk about prompting and encouragement, because that all falls into the activities that we're going to want to do with our children or our students. I'm a huge proponent of the Say, Show, Do model. We want to ask your child or tell your child what you want for them. And that could be, let's make chocolate milk. Let's squeeze the chocolate sauce into your milk and stir. And so we give the direction, and then we wait. And if they have difficulty or they can't quite do it, then we're going to show them what we want them to do. And we're going to take the chocolate and squeeze it into the milk, and we're going to stir it, and we're going to say, here, squeeze the chocolate and stir like this. We're going to model for them what we want. And then we're going to ask them to do it again. And then if they still have difficulty, they still can't quite master that task, then we're going to help them do that hand under hand. And that's the next little bullet there. Hand under hand is so much more important than hand over hand. When we provide hand under hand prompting, we're still giving our child the control of the environment. We're still giving them the option of taking their hand away if they can't manage all of the pressure of completing this task. And then we can wait for them to come back. But hand under hand gives our child the control and the ability to guide what's happening in that interaction. When we encourage our children, it's great to say good job, but it's even nicer to say you did it. You squeezed that sauce, that chocolate sauce, into your milk. I like the way you picked up all your toys and put them in the bin. If our child is working really hard to complete a task, but they didn't quite get it, a great encouragement is, I can tell that you gave that your all. Next time, maybe we can look under the couch for your toys when we're cleaning up. Where I'm really proud that you didn't give up. Maybe we didn't do this just the way we wanted, but I'm so proud of you for not giving up. And there's always, let's try again tomorrow. I'm so proud of you. Let's try this again tomorrow. One of the things I do, just to kind of go back there, that is always helpful for me and my students, at the end of an O&M lesson, one of the things I say to them is, what was something that was really easy about this task? And they might tell me something that I didn't expect or something that I did expect. But then I say, what was hard? What was the hardest thing about this? And again, sometimes I'm surprised because it might look like it looked like they did the task so easily, but in their head they struggled. And that's a great communication that we can have with our children, just to find out their perception of how the activity went or the lesson. And then I always follow that up with, you did a really great job of scanning today, and I noticed that you saw all of the cars that were coming, but what I noticed that you need to work on is initiating that crossing at the right time, something like that. All right, so let's talk about some foundational skills of O&M, because before we get out onto the street, before we pick up that cane, or before we plan the route, we need some really great foundational skills. And those skills start with these things, with colors and shapes and following directions and sound localizations and textures. So let's talk about some activities that will help us do that. Let's talk about color. So a game we can play is color scavenger hunt. And it's really looking around your house and finding things of a specific color. And so we might want to put out 4 sheets of construction paper and ask our kids to go find things of that color. If our child or our student is in phase 1 CVI, we might decide to only use one color, their favorite color, and then give them that sheet of construction paper, or give them a bowl, of a yellow bowl, and say, we're going to find things that are yellow, and then take the objects and put them in a place where we know that they can see them. So perhaps it's 3 objects, and one of those objects is on a shelf where nothing else is there, and there's a nice black background, and we have the light shining on that, so that we're supporting each aspect of each characteristic of a CVI. For our kids in phase 2, we might decide to do 3 or 4 colors, have our construction paper. But before we start the game, as the adult, as a parent, as the teacher, we might decide to collect 5 items of each color and preview them first with our child or our student. And so we might take the yellow banana and the frog and the apple and the ball and bring them to our child and talk about the function, the object, the salient features of that object. And then after we reviewed them, then take them, put them back where they belong, and ask our child or our student to go find them and bring them back and put them on the correct paper. For our students in phase 3 CVI, we might decide to just say, go find something yellow. Or we might decide to take some photographs, take some pictures of the objects, of the colors that we're searching for, and show our child the picture and ask them to go find it, and then bring it back and put it on the correct color paper. For our kids with low vision, we might decide to give them a bowl or a cup and send them out in the house to find things that are the same color as their bowl. And making sure that we're putting the objects within their line of sight, within their ability to find, to reach it, to see it, and to reach it, and to bring it back. For our students who are deaf-blind or have a dual sensory loss, we want to make sure that we're providing a nice foundation of language. We want to make sure that we're providing them the sign. We might sign yellow, and then pick up the yellow piece of construction paper and sign yellow, and then tell them that we're going to go find something yellow. And together, go find something yellow and match it to the paper and say, look, they're both yellow, they're both the same. We might decide to do a color hop, aka hopscotch with colors. And so remembering that if lots of our children, especially with CVI, have lower field issues. And so we might need to make the boxes bigger or farther apart so that our children are able to see them better. And if we make our own sidewalk chalk, our own sidewalk sidewalk paint, we can always add glitter to it to add that little property of movement. And so for our kiddos in phase 1 CVI, we might decide to just use one color, just use all yellow or all red, whatever their preferred color is, and ask them to follow the line, follow the red line, follow the yellow line in whatever way it is that they move. For our kids in phase 2, we might use 3 or 4 colors. We might ask them to identify or recognize the color, maybe recognize the color, let's step on the box that is blue, and then give them the color name and ask them to step on it. Or we might give them cards, index cards with the same colors on them, and give them the card and ask them to find the one that is the same. Jump or hop onto the one that is the same. And then for our kids in phase 3 CVI, we might use a variety of colors, a variety of cards or spinners that match the grid on the hopscotch board, and ask our child in phase 3 to identify that color and then hop onto that color, or identify that color and find a block that is different, that is not the same. So if they pull a yellow card, they have to find any block that is not yellow. For students with low vision, we might decide, for kids with low vision, we want to use bright colors. We want to use colors that are in high contrast to the ground. And same goes with the cards or the spinners. We want them to be bright colors and a high contrast. And again, for our students with dual sensory loss, we're going to model a lot of language, a lot of the color signs. We're going to model the action that we want them to do. So we might pull a yellow card, sign yellow, and then jump onto the yellow square. We can think about colors in books and videos about colors. And so this first book that I pulled up here for us, my color flip book, it is a free printable, and it's there again. If you like it, we can put that address in the comment box. So for our students who are in phase 1, we might have the book available, but not necessarily have that as our main prop. We want to have the crayons or the markers that match the picture in the book. And so we're going to present that. We're going to talk about reading my color flip book, but really when we're doing that, we want to show them the actual object. For our kids in phase 2, we are going to pair the book, the picture in the book, to the crayon or the marker that matches. And then for our kids in phase 3, we are going to ask them to identify the color on the page, and go through the book, look at all the colors, identify those colors, and then sequence the crayons in the same order that they appeared in the book. And that's an awesome early mapping skill, that sequencing, remembering and then sequencing how those colors appeared in the book. For our kids with low vision, we want to make sure that we are making the print or the picture large enough for our kids with acuity issues, or just the right size for our kids with visual field deficits, because we know that if our child or our student has a field loss, making it bigger doesn't necessarily make it better. For our kids who are blind, who have no vision, color is still an important thing to talk about. We're of course not going to ask them to identify colors or jump on the yellow block, but we can talk about color in the forms that they are going to come across in regular conversation. And then again, for our students with dual sensory loss, we're going to model, we're going to pair, we're going to match, and we're going to provide some really great foundational language for them. Dr. Seuss's Book of Colors is a great video on YouTube. I won't turn it on for you guys since apparently my audio isn't working. But again, it's a really fun one to view with your kids. Let's talk about textures. Another great activity for building foundational skills. So we have texture boards and matching texture matching cards and texture rubbings and texture sortings, all of these kinds of things that we can do to really explore textures. perhaps I should have prefaced all of this with colors and textures and sounds and shapes. All of those things are important when we're completing orientation and mobility routes, right? We have to be able to know the difference between the sidewalk and the grass, the texture difference. We have to, when we can, we want to use those color cues as anchors. We want to know that we've passed the building with the big round windows in the front. All of those things are important for orientation and mobility for that reason. All right, so back to textures. So for our kids, if we wanted to make a texture board for our student or our child with CBI in phase 1, we might use a variety of textures, but just one color. So we might find a whole bunch of things that are green and put them on our texture board, understanding that when our child is exploring this textually, they're not going to look at it. So we want to give them the board, let them feel it. We want to wait until they're finished exploring and then show it to them. We want them to look at it, and then we want to describe it. We want to tell them what those textures are. But understanding that for our kids in phase 1, we need to layer the way we do that and provide those senses individually. For our kids in phase 2, we will name the texture and ask them to find it. Find the texture that is rough or smooth, etc. And we don't necessarily need to limit our board to just one color. We can use 3 or 4 or 5 colors depending on your child. In phase 3, we might ask our students to match or sort or identify the textures on the board. And again, for our children with dual sensory loss, we are going to ask them to feel this rough texture, make sure we're providing really great language for them, and ask them to find one that's the same or find one that's different. For continuation of textures, we can do texture collages. So creating a picture out of a variety of different textured materials. Maybe we'll set out some materials like textured papers or paper scraps of materials, maybe some objects from nature, maybe some small metal washers, or big metal washers, cotton balls, and old pieces of puzzle, all of those things that we can give to our children and ask them to use that to create a work of art. We might want to add texture to our finger paint. So take that finger paint and add some rice or add some beans or add some sand so that it makes it a different texture for them to play with. Or perhaps we'll just take our finger paint and paint over the bubble wrap or over the egg carton, things that are all different textures, so that we're teaching our kids how to really identify and recognize changes in textured surfaces. And it's great pre-brow skills too. And sensory bins, I think every single one of us has at some point used a sensory bin. I love the metal wands. And so you could use a bin of rice and then use the little metal discs that go with them and just put in the red ones for our kids in phase 1 CBI or whatever their preferred color is. We can ask our kids to sort through and find just the blue pom-poms, or we can kind of pop their favorite toys into the bottom of a bin of beans and ask them to sort through and find their favorite toy. We want to make sure when we're exploring textures with our children that we don't surprise them, that we just don't take their hand and plop it into some cold, wet, riced up kind of finger paint that is going to be aversive. We want to make sure that they can expect, if it's going to be warm or cold or wet or dry, that they can expect that and be ready for that. We might want to take our kids on a texture walk. And so outside that, we have a big, huge nature-filled variety. But if we do that inside, we might take some carpet squares or some blankets or some egg crates and make a texture walk. And if we do it in a circle, we can, and we do a repeating pattern, and we get to the blanket, we might be able to say to our student, what's coming next? If we went carpet square, egg crate, grass, blanket, and we do that several times, what comes next? Or what did we just leave? So we're talking about before and after, and anticipating and identifying those different textures under our feet. We can also have textured snacks and just really build that language of bumpy, like rice pudding has lumps in it, or fruit snacks are gummy and chewy, and bubble gum is sticky after we chew it, but before we chew it, it's kind of hard. Let's think about shapes, and shapes are very similar to colors in the way that we can address them. So again, we're going to see the shape hop, right, really close to our color hop, and we're going to do the same thing. We're going to just put out these different shapes and have some cards or some spinners, and we're going to ask our child to find the shape that we're identifying. Show them a card with a triangle and ask them to find a triangle on the ground. Or show them a circle and say, step on anything except a shape that is a circle. Or if we're playing inside, we can use that painter's tape and make the shapes on the floor and toss the bean bags. Toss the bean bag onto the triangle, onto the diamond, onto the heart, onto the rectangle. Again, modeling and addressing the colors and the spacing and the time for latency and complexity, basing all of that on where our specific child or student is. And shapes. And this is these are great activities for our students, especially in phase 1. So we see that we have the light box or a light tablet, and we have just the shape illuminated on that tablet. So we can talk about a cube. This cube is red, but you can see that we have everything on the light box covered except for the shape of this. So the light is illuminating the cube or the cylinder or the sphere. And we can talk about that, ask our child to look. After they look, explore it tactually, describe the salient features of those shapes. And then for our kids who are able to use a shape sorter, we can see here that we have the red cube, and the space for the red cube is highlighted with the red tape there. Let's think about following directions. Another great foundational skill that's not just great for O&M, but great for everybody, following directions. For following directions, we have lots of activities that we can do. Simon Says is universal, right? Everybody knows about Simon Says. And so when we're thinking about Simon Says, again, we want to consider, when we're asking our child to do movements, we want to consider where they are along the hierarchy of spatial understanding. So can they complete commands that are just body to body, or can my child complete commands that are body to object or object to object? So we want to make sure that when we give a command, it's within their spatial understanding. Or if we give one that's just beyond, we want to make sure that we're modeling that for them really well. For this really fun grid on the floor, we could make a grid like this on the floor, or we could do it on a table or on a tray. Use rope on the floor, or maybe wiki sticks on the table. And then we can either start on the bottom left and then roll the die, and then however, let me back that up. Draw a card, and the card gives us the direction. We're going to go left or right or forward or backward. And then we roll the die to tell us how many steps we're going to take forward or backward, or move our piece, if it's on the table, forward or backward until we get to the top right. Or perhaps we're just going to make this grid and follow the directions where we step. So the first square might be forward, and then the second square says go right. For direction following, we can use stickers and dabbers. So we might want to give our child a piece of paper and ask them to put the green sticker on the top left. You can read there the orange sticker on the bottom right, or the pink sticker in the center. And for our kids in phase 1 CBI, perhaps we want to make sure that we're giving them the directions within their motor ability. But we might also just use the dabber and provide that hand under hand assistance and say, we're going to put this dabber, we're going to put a red mark on the top left of your paper. And so tell them what we're going to do. If they need help, we're going to help them hand under hand to do that. And then after they do it, we're going to pick up that paper and we're going to show them what we did. Remembering that our students in phase 1 cannot integrate looking and listening and touching all at the same time. So again, we want to do those directions. We want to facilitate that activity in whatever way they need. And then we want to show them the product after they've done it. And that will work with stickers or dabbers. One of the higher kind of skills is the do as I say, not as I do game. And so we want to give a command, but we want to model a different action. So it might be stick out your tongue, but we tap our head, right? So we want our students to understand that we want them to do what the command says, not what our action is. Make sure I didn't miss anything here on my notes. All right. I'm doing a lot of talking, so anybody has a question, please jump in here. Let's think about listening skills. The after game. So the after game was something new to me when I was looking for games to talk to you guys about. And so the after game is really a process, right? So we're going to give a direction. We're going to have a list of activities. And so each child is given an activity, but they have to listen for the activity that came before them. So for example, after somebody runs in place, stand up and jump 3 times. So we have to be listening for what happens before us so that we know when it's our turn to do something. And we can give our children a piece of paper stating what their action is, or we can tell them what their action is. And the directions can be modified to suit any child's level of physical activity. And so the parent or the teacher might start by running in place. So they're going to run in place. And then let's say our student who has phase 1 CBI, their action might be pressing a switch, right? So for a student in phase 1, their part is after someone says, Mary, press your switch, Mary will lift her hand and press her switch. So after someone says, press your switch, go ahead and press your switch. That's for our student in phase 1. For a student in phase 2, we might use verbal cues. We might use a physical cue, but we might also use a verbal cue. So perhaps for a student in phase 2, their direction would be after someone says yippee, you clap your hands 4 times. So they're listening for somebody to say yippee, and they're going to clap 4 times. For our students in phase 3, again, we might use verbal cues to do the same thing. But our students in phase 3, perhaps we're asking them to visually look and interpret. So if it's a small crowd and it's not too complex, then they might be able to use their vision to see that somebody is taking a bow, or to see that somebody is flapping their arms like a chicken, so that they know when they see that and they interpret that information, that they can then whip their hair back and forth. And we all know about hot potato and musical chairs and how listening to that directs the activity. And so for our kids with dual sensory loss who might not hear that music playing to know when to stop passing the potato or finding their seat, we can use the light switch. So when the light's on, we're going to pass the potato, or we're going to walk around the chairs. But when the light goes out, that's when we know whoever's holding the potato is out of the circle, or if you didn't find your chair when the light turned off, then your turn is over. All right, sound localization. Again, for our kids with dual sensory loss, this is difficult for them perhaps. But if they have some hearing, then we might be able to use a drum or something, some loud environmental sound. For our kids in phase 1, we might use a familiar adult who calls their name. And perhaps that adult is wearing their favorite colored shirt. So if mom says, Susie, look for me, and then mom is standing in Susie's preferred visual field, Susie can turn to that sound and find mom. For our kids in phase 2, perhaps we place the sound source in an area with low complexity. We want to place that sound source in an area of low complexity, and then have the sound go off and ask them to find it. I've used my iPad connected to a speaker so that I can control that sound turning on or off. Musical toys, or those lovely beeping Easter eggs, all of those, or the beeping balls, all of those can be used as a sound source to ask our child to find them. We want to make sure that we're placing them within their within areas that support their vision, making sure that it's not too high or too low for them, and that they can reach it when they find it. Activities for building mobility skills. So after we've kind of worked on those foundational skills, then we can start thinking about some actual mobility skills. When we're helping our children or our students be mobile, we want to make sure that we're using great technique. And so if we decide that this part of our activity is going to use some human guide, then we want to make sure that we're using the right human guide. And so when it's somebody who is the same height, if we have children working together, or you know, a tall child and a short adult, we want to have them grabbing right above the elbow. So we make the C shape with our arm, with our hand, and then we take the arm right above the elbow of the person who's guiding us. When we have somebody who's really taller than us, then they might feel more comfortable placing their arm on your shoulder, their hand on your shoulder, and feeling your movement from there. And if we have a small child and a larger adult, then they're going to grab, again, make the C cup with your hand and grab right at the wrist. And the person who is guiding, they're about half a step in front of the person to whom they are guiding. And I put up this really funny caption here of the person pushing the visually impaired person across the street or up the street. We know that that's not how it's done, and that takes away all the power of our students and our children. Trailing is another skill that our children who are mobile use, or children who are being pushed in their wheelchairs have the ability to really trail. And so we see our little friend here in his walker trailing the wall. And so perhaps he's trailing that wall to the end, to the corner where the wall ends, because he knows that he's going to turn right, or he knows that when he reaches the end of that hallway that he crosses the open space, and that's where he'll find the water fountain. We see this cute little cricket here in the middle. She's cruising along, but she's using that table to trail her way to the end, and she knows when she reaches the end she either needs to turn around and go back, or if she's unable to walk independently, to kind of drop down and crawl. And the last picture just shows you the correct way to trail. You want to make sure your fingers are cupped, because if they're sticking out and you reach a door jamb, you might jam them up a little bit. So this is another example of how our children and our students can be more independent and use their mobility more independently by trailing. Part of mobility might be cane skills. We might need our children to use canes or adaptive mobility as a form of safe travel. And so we see our first little friend here, she's using one of those push toys. And that push toy, this push toy in particular, gives a little physical support. But we see our little friend here in the center, she's using her cane to find a drop off in the truncated domes. And even our little guys in wheelchairs here at the bottom can use a cane to find those drop offs. And our little friend over here in the bottom left, she is wearing a belted cane. So cane skills can, and our friends up here who are walking and chatting and having a good time as they are mobile. We think about routes whenever we're thinking about mobility. And again, not so much the orientation piece of completing a route, but the physical aspect of being mobile from one place to the next. So within our own home, I need to travel a route from my bedroom to the kitchen for breakfast. So how do I physically move from my bedroom to the kitchen? How do I physically move? What is the way that I get from the monkey bars to the swing set and I'm on the playground? How do I physically move from that place to the next? We might think about bus routes. I need to go from my house to my work. So what if I need to take the bus, what is the route that the bus will take? How do I get to the bus and what is the route? And of course, the family minivan is another way to complete a route. We get in the car at our own house, and the car takes us from home to grandma's house. The physical movement from one place to the next. Let's consider activities for building orientation skills. So we now have talked about mobility and completing routes and the safest way to travel, the safest way, the most efficient way, and the safest way to travel, physically travel from one place to the next. Let's talk about maintaining our orientation and some activities that we can do to build those concepts. So again, let's think about spatial concepts. And we'll just review that our spatial concepts are built in a hierarchy from body to body to body to object to object to object. And so one of the things that we might do early on is head and shoulders, knees and toes, right? It's a great song. Everybody knows it, and you can add in your eyes and your ears and your mouth and your nose and any other body part that you want, and your child can touch that on themselves. Maybe for our kids in phase 1 CVI, they might want to wear some bright gloves, right? When they're looking at their hands, we're just asking them to look at their hands. So maybe they'll wear some gloves or some nice bright shoes. Or if you're happy, clap your hands. So again, you're creating this activity where we're using our own body to touch our own body, our hands and our feet and our legs. Then we take and build that into body to object. And so we might want to crawl in the tube so that in the tunnel, so that we're inside the tent. We can be in the tent, we can be out of the tent, we can be behind the tent or next to the tent. We can go up the stairs and down the slide. Our bodies can go under the slide. We can use hula hoops, and we can be inside the hula hoop and outside the hula hoop. We can be under the hula hoop and over the hula hoop. All of those great spatial concepts and words that we need to use for travel. The second part of that hierarchy is ourself in relation to that object. And then we're going to move on to object. And so we might ask our child to put the red block on top of the yellow block, or the green block behind the orange block, or the pencil on the book, or the book on the table, or the book under our chair. We might ask them to put the spoon in the bowl. We might hide their favorite objects, right? When we're to this object to object part of our spatial hierarchy, we might take their favorite objects and hide them, and then use a game for them to find it, giving them directions. So we might say, I know you're looking for your favorite stuffed animal, and it is behind that thing that you sleep on every day, every night, or it is next to the TV, or it is under your favorite blanket. And again, for our kids with dual sensory loss or who are blind, we're going to need to use touch cues, and we're going to need to do a lot of modeling and reinforcing for those. We're going to think about directionality and laterality. I've always kind of used these terms interchangeably, but they're actually two different skills. And so laterality is the internal awareness of space located to the right and left of midline of our own body. So for laterality, it is left and right in relation to ourselves. It is the internal awareness of both your left and right sides of your body working together and in opposition to each other. Our sense of laterality begins when we're a baby, when we're crawling on the floor and both sides of our bodies need to work in tandem to create that hand-knee reciprocation. Directionality takes this awareness of left and right and it expands it a step further. So for directionality, it's our ability to take the concept of left and right from our own space beyond our fingertips. So directionality is the ability to see right and left on others and on objects and environments, right? So it might be the milk is on the left side of the second shelf, or the car is coming from the left side of the intersection. So understanding that left and right on somebody else is different than left and right on myself. We want to be sure to use terms left and right throughout our day. So we might say to our child, your bracelet's on your right hand, or put your right arm in your shirt first, or you're holding the spoon in your left hand, or the chair is on your right side, or grandma's house is on the left. When we pull on the street, grandma's house is going to be on the left side. Using all those words every day. Cardinal directions. Cardinal directions are again a bit of a higher level, a higher concept part of orientation and mobility. And we might want to start cardinal directions with a game where we can write north, south, east, and west on paper, and perhaps color code it and put them up in our house, in a room, or even outside on a post or something, and so that the north, south, east, and west match the actual cardinal directions. And then we find a card, and then we draw a card that says hop 5 times to the north, or take 3 steps to the west. And so the cards, as you can see in our picture here, the cards might be color coded so that when we're going to hop 3 times to the west, it's on a green card, and south is on a red card, and north is on a black card, so that we have that additional color cue. And that can get us started on initiating the skill of teaching cardinal directions. I have 2 really cute videos here that I won't show you, but the video of the gentleman here with our map, he's talking about how in the video they talk about how you can choose a central location, and then from that location think about the things that are north, south, east, or west, and take a picture of that and put that on the map around your central location. So let's say the central location is school. North of the school is the farm where his grandparents lived, and south of the school is the zoo and east of the school is the ocean and west of the school is the playground. And so when we leave school and we're talking about which way we're going, we might say that home is north. We're going to travel north on Route 15 to get home, or we're going to travel south on Route 895 when we go to the zoo, or we're going to travel west when we go to the park. All of those things, incorporating those terms into our travel. And then the sun is an activity where in the video they talk about using the sun in the morning as your form of reference for east and how it changes. It's a little song that talks about how it changes throughout the day, the position of the sun. We want to think about landmarks and clues or cues, and how we can use those to maintain our orientation and to help us maintain our orientation and know when we're going on the right way on our route. And we want to make the landmarks for our kids with CVI. We want to specifically and intentionally choose and adapt landmarks according to their CVI needs. So we might put a red pom-pom on the door or a shiny strip on the corner where we turn. The definition of a clue on our route is going to be temporary. It's temporary information that is sometimes there and sometimes not there, but it's there enough that it's a hint about what's coming up. A landmark, on the other hand, a landmark is permanent and it's unique, and we're always going to find it in the same place. Both clues and landmarks encompass all available sensory information. So we're going to use auditory and tactile and olfactory and visual cues and clues and landmarks to help keep us oriented on our route and to confirm the landmarks or clues on our route.
Becky, it is about 2 minutes until 4.
Ah, okay.
And I believe you are over at 4. But I don't want to stop you. You can keep going, but I know some people are probably going to need to sign off at 4. So how about if I put the poll up for everyone to fill out? If you do have to leave, please fill in the poll before you leave. And Becky, if you want to just keep going.
Okay, thanks, Sherry. All right, so let's think about landmarks and clues for indoors. So a tactile clue, a tactile landmark for indoors might be a tile floor. So if in your child's bedroom you have carpeting, but in the kitchen you have tiles, that's a tactile landmark for them, knowing that I am going from my bedroom and I'll know I'm in the kitchen when the carpet ends and the tiled floor picks up. But a clue might be a throw rug. So the throw rug might be in front of the couch and it's usually there. But if you have an ornery dog like I have, then you might not find that throw rug there every day because it's been pulled away by the dog. So that would be a clue. It's there most of the time, but not always. An auditory indoor landmark might be the humming of a refrigerator. You go into the kitchen and you hear that refrigerator humming. And a clue might be the microwave, because while the microwave is in the kitchen and it has a distinct and unique sound, you'll only hear that sound when somebody's using the microwave. An indoor landmark might be the bright floor in the kitchen. Again, if you have tile in the kitchen, that's a nice bright color, different from the flooring that's in the living room, then that's a nice landmark. That's a nice visual landmark. But the light shining in the kitchen window is a clue, because at night that light's not going to be shining in there. The sun's not going to be shining at night. Or on a cloudy day, that light might not be there. So that's a clue. For olfactory, I think olfactory, my own personal is that olfactories are clues, because they might not always be there. The bathroom has a certain smell, the kitchen has a certain smell, but we might not always be frying onions in the kitchen for that clue. For temperature, again, you might find tile on the floor is cool, but that can't necessarily be a landmark unless you're always in your bare feet, because if you're wearing socks or shoes, you're not going to feel that temperature change from the floor, from the changes in floor surfaces. When we're exploring landmarks and clues and we're identifying them with our children, we want to just really explore that room with them. And we can do that through child-driven exploration or through systematic exploration. And so it might be that your child doesn't want you to really lead them. They want to explore on their own. And you can do that and really talk about when they find something, when they stop on something, talk about how it's a landmark or a clue and how they can use that to help find their way through the house. For systematic exploration, if you really want them to understand something and you want to make sure that all of the important areas are covered, then you're going to start with the perimeter around the room, find all the things there, and then you're going to move to the middle. We're going to make sure that we label and explore all the items that we find. We want to talk about the function and the salient features and the purpose of those landmarks or clues. And we can repeat that for each room in the house. Sometimes you might need to add a landmark or clue for your child to be more independent. So you might want to put a red pom-pom on your child's bedroom door, or some corrugated paper near the door handle, so that when they reach for the handle and they feel that corrugated paper, they know that that's their room and not their brother's room. When we think about landmarks and clues outside, a tactile clue outside would be a change in environmental surface, such as a drop off to the steps in front of the house. The steps that lead to your porch, they're always going to be there. They're a landmark. Or the drop off from the sidewalk to the street. So, and that could be a clue or a landmark depending on the situation. So it's really experience driven. If it's the steps that go, like again, the steps that go from your house down to the sidewalk, that's a landmark. But if it's the drop off from the sidewalk to the curb, that might be a clue, because there are lots of places that have drop offs. I'm just going to get this pole out of the way. For olfactory, when we're outdoors, the humming of the ice machine, like outside of Sheetz or Royal Farm, that ice machine is usually running because it has to keep the ice cold when it's outside. And so that would be a nice landmark. The equipment sounds from an auto mechanics store, that when you're walking from home to the park and you pass the auto mechanics, that sound is more of a clue, because they might not always be using the compressed air machine to make that fun sound. A lot of times they are, and when you hear it, you know what it is, but it's not necessarily a landmark because it's not always consistently there. Cars moving on the overpass is going to be a clue, because during rush hour, you're going to hear constant cars moving on the overpass, but at 2 in the morning, it might be an occasional car on the overpass. For a visual landmark outside, might be a really bright overhead awning, like the one on the corner here. The outdoor picture on the top right of our landmarks and clues. We can see that this awning is different than the other awnings. It sticks out farther and it's lower. This corner on this bank is rounded, and so that's a landmark because it's different from the other corners that are pointy. We could use a statue as a landmark. However, the sandwich board signs that businesses put outside of their door, you know, the kind that kind of fold up and come in at night, that's a clue. Because at night it's not there when the store is closed, or if it gets bumped over or knocked over, it's not going to be there. Most of the time it's probably there, but maybe not always. Olfactory, outside, we might have the bakery. The bakery smells delicious, and most of the time that smell is going to be there. But if you're walking toward the bakery and the wind is taking that scent away from you, you might not be able to smell it. Same thing with gasoline. The nail salon is another great one, or restaurants. All great olfactory clues, but they might not always be there. For our students with dual sensory loss, this might be a great time to introduce haptics. So really talking about how we can use our body to talk about things in the social environment. And then temperature. So if we're out in the community and we're at the Sheets and they have a walk-in cooler, there at that specific Sheets, that walk-in cooler is going to be a landmark. But at the grocery store, where there are rows and rows and rows of coolers that open, then that's going to be more of a clue. Mapping. Let's talk about mapping. So maps can be object-based. They can be used on backlit surfaces. Maps can be three-dimensional or two-dimensional. They can be physical representations of a route or a space, or they can be cognitive representations. They can be mental representations. At an integration level, cognitive representation of space involves envisioning your destination. It involves spatial memory, inference skills, and the ability to adjust your spatial perception as you move through space. Maps are representational. They can be used to help your child locate a landmark and salient features in the environment. They can help to build temporal concepts, order, sequence. They can help to build time and space concepts. And they're intended to help our children be proactive in O&M. And so many of my students, and I'm sure so many of your students and children, have anxiety related to traveling in unknown spaces. And so understanding maps and sequencing and order and time space concepts, those are all tools that will help our children understand their environment better. And we know that when they understand their environment, they feel safer and are able to travel with more independence. Maps should be individualized, and they are great to make with your child or with your student. So here on our first page, we see that we have just single objects. And so we have a ball that might represent PE. The gym, we have a lunch tray that will represent the cafeteria, and maybe this yellow bin that we find on the secretary's desk when we're taking the attendance up for the day. And so in the beginning for our phase 1 kids, we might give them just this one object representation. But as we become more familiar with how maps work and using them throughout our lesson, we might say we're going to travel first to PE and then we're going to go to the cafeteria. So we might be able to use 2 objects on our map. Again, these are some examples of activities that are hopefully used in the classroom to represent activities and spaces, and we can further use that with our students to create routes and maps on our orientation lessons or in our home. Just some more examples of how we can do that. Here we have tactile maps. Our first map up here on the left is a tactile map that was created of a school. And so the student helped to make this, and in the process of making it, they are more apt to understanding how it's set up. And we have a commercially made map of a school. Has the braille and the different types of textures on it for our students. Again, other commercially produced maps of outdoors and an office building. And every TVI and comms friend is the picture maker kit. It allows us to make those maps with the students and vary and reuse it again on different lessons. And here we have multimedia and print maps, 2D maps. The first map is something that the student made and the child made, and they were able to color in the spaces that were important to them and add the building, so a multimedia map. Our second map is just a simple, very play map that we might want to use with our student with CVI. The star representing where we left our car, and then the smiley face representing where the water fountain is, where we like to stop to get a drink, and then the X being the duck pond where we like to feed the ducks. Duck food, of course, and never bread, as all the signs say. We have the pre-made maps, our little town map, where we can start talking about map keys and asking our students to look at the key and find that picture within the map, and then using a representation of themselves of how they would travel from the post office to the library. On the bottom left, we see a map that a student made. This is her map. This is what she did, and it made sense to her for our low vision student. And again, another pre-made map with a key that we can, if we're solely thinking about the recycling bin, we can use color as an anchor to color on those recycling bins. Great pre-map skills. Oh, and that's it. Any questions, concerns, any comments? Oops, get rid of that. Oops, almost canceled that whole meeting.
I don't see any questions in the chat box, so we are over our time. No questions, so we're over our time. So we will go ahead and end for the day. Thank you, Becky. And
My pleasure. Thanks everybody for coming.
Sherry, you can stop recording.
I know, I'm trying to figure it out.